The storied franchise of the Celtics, legend follows legend, from Cousy to Russell to Havlicek to Cowens to Bird and now to Reggie Lewis.
Even as a kid, he was part of a storied basketball program, as he would be a member of Baltimore's legendary Dunbar Poets. A lesser role on that team would see him not be as highly recruited as some of his teammates, so he would choose to attend Northeastern University, where he would go on to be the greatest player in program history. The Celtics would then swipe him in the 1987 draft, and after a year in waiting, Reggie Lewis put together an incredibly consistent 5-year stretch as he slowly was handed the torch to the storied Boston Celtics by NBA legend Larry Bird. Lewis would consistently be one of the team's best and most efficient offensive players, while also playing great on the defensive end, averaging over a block and a steal per game over the course of his career. He would earn an All-Star selection in Larry Bird's final season and looked primed to be the Celtics' future following another great season, this time as the Celtics' top option. But he would tragically pass away at 27 years old after just 6 NBA seasons. When he passed, it wasn't just the loss of a great player, but also the loss of a great person, as he was a consummate professional both on and off the court. And even though his greatness is recognized by many, he unfortunately only had a 6-year career, and tends to be left out when talking about the great Boston Celtics, as he is the only Celtic to have had his number retired without winning a championship. But in the small sample he gave fans, he was one of the top shooting guards in the league, and looked like he was going to retain that status for years to come. So today, we're going to focus your attention on the late, great Reggie Lewis. Let's jog your memory. Reggie Lewis played high school basketball for the Paul Lawrence Dunbar High Poets in Baltimore, Maryland, where he would play with future NBA players Muggsy Bogues, David Wingate, and Reggie Williams, on what many have deemed the greatest high school basketball team of all time. And if you want a more in-depth look at this team, I highly recommend checking out the 30 for 30 called Baltimore Boys that documents these 4 players and their high school dominance. The Poets, led by coach Bob Wade, went 29-0 and won the state championship in 1982. Then in 1983, the team again went undefeated at 31-0 to win the state title. And even though Wingate had graduated after the 1982 season, the team was still so talented that Reggie Lewis, as a senior, would continue to come off the bench as the 6th man he had been prior to Wingate's departure. And although he would go on to be arguably the best player out of the 4, in high school he was the least coveted, as Wingate and Williams would eventually win a national championship together at Georgetown, and the most popular of the bunch, Bogues, would attend Wake Forest, while Lewis would accept an offer to play for mid-major Northeastern University in Boston. And he may not have ever gotten that opportunity if it wouldn't have been for a snowstorm during a tournament in Pennsylvania, where Lewis would take home MVP. Lewis was a star for the Huskies upon arrival. As a freshman in 1984, he would be second on the team in scoring, third in rebounds and steals, and even lead the team in block shots, while shooting a career-high 52.8% from the field, as he would help guide Northeastern to a 14-game improvement on the previous season, as they would go from finishing 13-15 in 1983 to a school record 27-5 in 1984, including an undefeated 14-0 record in conference play. The Huskies would defeat Long Island in the first round in a game where Lewis scored 21 points on over 61% shooting. Unfortunately, the Huskies lost on a buzzer beater to VCU in the second round. However, Lewis played near perfect in this game, as he scored 31 points on 15 of 17 shooting. But for Lewis's freshman season, he finished with averages of about 18 points, 6 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game, as well as North Atlantic Conference Freshman of the Year and second team All-Conference. Lewis was the team's undoubtable leader going into his sophomore year. He was one of 2 starters, along with senior Quinton Dale, to score in double figures for the season, and would lead the team in points, rebounds, and steals. And his 24.1 points per game was a single-season program record. Additionally, it would make him the highest-scoring sophomore in the nation. Even with the loss of their top scorer from the year prior, Lewis's improvement was enough to keep the Huskies as a top 12 scoring offense in the nation, as Northeastern would finish with an overall record of 22-9 and a 13-3 record in conference play, securing them their second straight North Atlantic Conference title. The NCAA tournament was short-lived for Northeastern and Lewis, as Lewis really struggled to get going in this game, and although he scored 22 points, he scored a bulk of these points after the game was well out of reach, as Illinois blew out Northeastern in round 1. with Lewis shooting just 11 of 28 from the field. But for the regular season, Lewis would average about 24 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals per game, while being named North Atlantic Conference Player of the Year and First Team All-Conference. Lewis's junior season was much of the same, although he would spend a lot of time at the power forward position, and this would be reflected in his numbers, as on top of being the team's leading scorer by over 10 points per game, he led the team in rebounds, steals, and blocks. The Huskies had another incredible regular season as they went 16-2 in conference play to win their third straight North Atlantic Conference title, and would enter the tournament at 26-5 as a 13 seed. But unfortunately, a deep Oklahoma team would beat Northeastern by 6 after having 3 starters score at least 20 points. Lewis did all he could to get the win, as he scored a tournament career high of 35 points and pulled down 15 rebounds. But Oklahoma was able to key in on Lewis all game, as they made it difficult on him, and he shot just 12 of 34 from the field. And the Huskies had only one of their players score in double figures, which was only 11 points from Wes Fuller. So Lewis's junior season ended with him averaging about 24 points, 9.5 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks, en route to another Conference Player of the Year and First Team All-Conference. Lewis would cap off his college career with a great senior season, which once again saw him as the team's leader in scoring, rebounding, and blocks. And he would also shoot 33% from 3 in the first year that the NCAA adopted the three-point line. One major change was that longtime Huskies coach Jim Calhoun had accepted a position with UConn prior to the season, so the Huskies were being coached by Carl Fogel this year. And behind Lewis, the team would finish with a 17-1 record in conference play and take home their 4th straight conference title, and would finish the regular season at 27-6, which included an early season win versus defending national champion Louisville in the Great Alaskan Shootout. The Huskies would be matched up with the great Purdue team in the first round of the tournament, and for the 3rd consecutive year, Northeastern would be bounced from the tournament in the first round, as Purdue's starters combined for 95 points. The Huskies would have a balanced attack of their own, as they would have 4 players in double figures, with Lewis leading the way, with 23 points on just over 41% shooting. But he would foul out in the closing minutes of the game, and the Huskies would go on to lose by 9. But Lewis's final college season ended with him averaging about 23.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and about 1.5 assists, steals, and blocks per game, as he was again named First Team All-Conference and North Atlantic Conference Player of the Year for the 3rd consecutive season. Lewis left Northeastern as the program's leading scorer with 2,708 career points, which still stands today. Additionally, he ended his college career ranked 9th on the all-time Division I scoring list, and former coach Jim Calhoun would speak to Lewis's popularity during his career as a Husky, as he would recall one game where fans were breaking down the doors to see him play. Even though Lewis was a Baltimore boy, he was looked at as a local star by a lot of Boston basketball fans due to him playing at Northeastern, and this likely worked in Boston's favor, as the lack of national attention that Northeastern received had Lewis as one of Boston's best-kept secrets. But the Celtics, who were fresh off an NBA Finals appearance, clearly knew the potential of Lewis and would select him 22nd overall in the 1987 NBA draft. The Celtics were looking to secure young talent to learn under their aging big three of Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parish. The Celtics initially thought they had secured that player in the previous year's draft, when they selected Len Bias out of Maryland 2nd overall. But his tragic passing, less than 48 hours after he was drafted, prematurely ended the career of a player who many thought would be one of the best to ever do it. Reggie Lewis was a great pickup for the Celtics because he didn't have an ego and only cared about winning. He had also shown in high school that he would play a lesser role without issue if that's what was asked of him. And that would be the case in his rookie season, as the Celtics had a clearly established starting 5 led by their big 3 as well as Danny Ainge and Dennis Johnson, as Lewis would find himself deep in the rotation, only appearing in 49 games for the team and averaging just over 8 minutes per game, as he would have 8 games in double figures and a season-high 14 points on 3 occasions. But the Celtics didn't really need Lewis yet, as they finished the year 57-25, with Larry Bird finishing 2nd in MVP voting to Michael Jordan, and Kevin McHale averaging over 20 points and leading the league in field goal percentage, as they were both voted to the All-Star game and were joined by Danny Ainge, who made his first and only All-Star appearance of his career this season. Lewis was used even more sparingly in the playoffs, as he would appear in 2 games of the Celtics' 4-game first-round series win versus New York. He would see action in 6 out of the 7 games of Boston's famous second-round series versus Atlanta, where the Celtics fell behind 3-1 before winning the next 3, including the legendary Game 7 duel between Bird and Dominique Wilkins, to advance to the conference finals. Lewis would only see action in 4 out of the 6 games in the Celtics' Eastern Conference Finals matchup with Detroit, which they would lose, marking the first time in 5 years they did not reach the NBA Finals. But Lewis's quiet rookie season ended with him averaging about 4.5 points, 1.5 rebounds, and half an assist per game. In a surprising move, Celtics coach Casey Jones announced his retirement, so the 1989 Celtics were led by first-year head coach Jimmy Rogers, and Lewis would see a much larger role in year 2. However, while this was in part due to the coaching change, as Rogers swore to make better use out of the Celtics bench, it was also due to Larry Bird missing all but 6 games this year after having surgery to remove bone spurs in his heels. Lewis would play in 81 games, starting 57 of them, and averaging 32.8 minutes per game, almost 25 more minutes than his rookie season. However, he would play small forward instead of his usual shooting guard this year to fill in for Bird. Lewis would up his averages across the board and would finish 3rd on the team in scoring alongside McHale and Parish. Lewis would score double figures in 70 games this year, and would have 8 games with over 30 points, including a then career-high 39 points in a March 28th loss to Philly. Although Lewis was playing admirably in place of Bird, the Celtics went through their growing pains under a new coach, as they would go 10-31 on the road and finish just above 500 at 42-40. But they would luckily make the playoffs on the final day of the season as the 8th seed and get a rematch with Detroit. And although this series would end in the Celtics being swept, Lewis began a trend of elevating his game in the postseason. Game 1 would see him play 45 minutes and finish 2nd on the team with 20 points, as well as nabbing a team-leading 3 steals. He would play another 45 minutes in Game 2 and again finish 2nd on the team in scoring with 21 points along with 9 rebounds and 5 assists. Then he would play just 35 minutes due to foul trouble in Game 3, but still score a team-leading 20 points to go along with 9 rebounds on over 57% shooting. So the Celtics season was over, but Reggie Lewis had fans excited for the future, as his 2nd season would end with him finishing 2nd in most improved player voting, with averages of about 18.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. Bird returned to play in 75 games in the 1990 season, and Lewis, now back at shooting guard, found himself in the starting lineup more often than not, as he would start 54 of the 79 games he played in, as Danny Ainge had been traded to the Kings on February 23rd of the previous season for big men Ed Pinckney and Joe Klein. Additionally, McHale shifted back into his 6th man role, which he had effectively played early in his career. Even though Bird would never recapture his near MVP form from Lewis's rookie season, he still remained an elite NBA player for the remainder of his career, as he would lead the team in scoring, assists, and steals, while finishing 2nd in rebounds. Lewis's averages dropped slightly, but this was mostly due to the drop in usage after the return of Bird, as he shot a then career-high 49.6% from the field. The team was also without point guard Brian Shaw, who had been a great rookie for them the year prior, but had signed a 2-year contract to play for a professional club in Italy, and would suit up for them instead of the Celtics for the 1990 season. Shaw would sign a 5-year deal with the Celtics in January of this season, but then after informing the team after the season that he planned to play for the Italian club in 1991 to honor his 2-year commitment, it led to one of the most infamous contract disagreements in major sports history. But long story short, Shaw would be playing for the Celtics to begin the 91 season. Okay, but back to the 1990 season. Lewis would have another consistent year as he would score in double figures in 67 games, and would finish the season on a stretch where he scored at least 20 points in 14 of the final 18 games of the year. The Celtics were 52-30 at the end of the regular season, and Lewis had recorded 3 games with at least 30 points this year, and 2 of those had come against the Knicks, who the Celtics were now slated to play in round 1 of the playoffs. Boston would win the first 2 games, as Lewis would average 21.5 points on over 61% shooting in games 1 and 2. The Knicks evened the series over the next 2 games, but Lewis remained relatively consistent, as he would have 16 in Game 3 and then 23 in Game 4. But then the Knicks would defeat the Celtics in Boston in Game 5 to win the series, as Lewis finished 4th on the team in scoring with 19 points, and he would finish the series as the 3rd leading scorer on the team, at over 20 points on nearly 60% shooting. And for his regular season, he would average about 17 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Jimmy Rogers had been replaced by Celtics assistant Chris Ford prior to the 91 season, but the Celtics had Shaw back, which was much needed, as franchise legend Dennis Johnson had just retired. Additionally, the Celtics had a high-flying rookie named D. Brown, who would add some excitement and even win the dunk contest during All-Star Weekend. The Celtics started the season 29-5, and were looking like a force in the East, but then Bird would struggle with a compressed nerve root in his back, which led to him missing 22 games over the rest of the year. With Bird missing time, Lewis would take on more of the offensive load, and finish second on the team in scoring on over 49% shooting. Lewis would score in double figures in all but 5 of the 79 games he played, including a career-high 42 points in an April 12th win versus Miami, as well as 3 games where he would record a career-high 12 rebounds. The Celtics would finish 56-26 and match up with the Pacers in the first round. This series would become well known for Chuck Person taking it to Boston, but it would still end in a 5-game series win for the Celtics, as Lewis would lead all scorers with 28 in a Game 1 win, then go on to score less than 22 points just once in the next 4 games, as he would be the Celtics' top scorer for the series and play about 42 minutes per game. Round 2 brought a matchup with the 2-time defending champion Detroit Pistons, but for the 3rd time in Lewis's 4-year career, he would be knocked out of the playoffs by Detroit, as the Pistons won in 6. Bird was hobbled this series, as he would miss Game 1, then struggle over the next 5 games, averaging just 13.4 points on 38.2% shooting. Lewis would again be the team's leading scorer for the series, as he dropped at least 20 points in all 6 games, including 30 points and a postseason career-high 11 rebounds in a Game 5 loss. And even though one era of Celtics basketball was winding down, Lewis continued to give fans hope that they would remain competitive even after their big 3 were retired. But for his regular season, Lewis would average about 18.5 points, career-high 5.2 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. The 92 season was the best of Lewis's career. Lewis led the Celtics in scoring for the first time in his career, which would also mark the first and only time of Larry Bird's career in which he wasn't the Celtics' leading scorer. However, after off-season surgery, Bird would miss 37 games this year due to back problems, and would often have to lay on the sidelines in the games he did play in to try and alleviate some of his discomfort. Additionally, McHale would only play in 56 games, and D. Brown had suffered a knee injury during the preseason, which limited him to just 31 games. Brian Shaw would also miss the first month of the season with a hamstring injury, and eventually be traded to Miami on January 10th for point guard Sherman Douglas. Lewis would play and start in all 82 games for the first and only time in his career, as he would be the only player on the team to start all 82 games. On top of being the team's leading scorer, he would shoot a career-high 50.3% from the field, as well as put up career-high averages in steals and blocks, as he would see himself voted to his first and only All-Star game. Lewis would score in double figures in 80 games this year, and his 20.8 points per game would be good for 15th in the league. Even with all the injuries and changes, the Celtics still managed to finish the season at 51-31 and would enter the playoffs with a matchup versus Indiana. This would be a much quicker series than the previous year, as the Celtics swept Indiana in a great series from Lewis, as he averaged nearly 28 points and 2.5 steals per game, while shooting over 48%, as he would drop 36 in Game 1 and 32 in Game 3. The Celtics were also without Larry Bird for the entire series, and he continued to miss time in the second round series versus Cleveland, as he would appear in 4 games and start just 2 of them. Lewis would play the best postseason series of his career versus Cleveland. With the series tied at a game apiece, he would drop 36 points to will the Celtics to a Game 3 win, and would follow that with a postseason career high of 42 in a 2-point Game 4 loss, as overall, he would score at least 22 points and never shoot below 50% for the entire 7-game series, which the Celtics eventually lost, even though Lewis averaged about 28, 4, and 4, along with 2.5 steals and a block for the series. And for the regular season, he would average about 21 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. On August 18th, 1992, Larry Bird announced his retirement from the NBA, leaving Reggie Lewis as the team's new leader, and the Celtics would signify that with a C, as he would be named their new team captain during training camp leading up to the 1993 season. Aside from the loss of Bird, the Celtics looked quite similar to the year prior, and did bring in former All-Star Xavier McDaniel to help make up for the loss of Bird. Lewis would once again lead the Celtics in scoring, dropping 20.8 per game, which would be good for 16th in the league, as he would play and start 80 games, while playing a team and career high 39.3 minutes per game, which would also be 7th highest in the league. Lewis would again have just 2 games where he didn't score in double figures, and recorded 10 games with at least 30 points. He would also have his best passing season, as he would average a career-high 3.7 assists, and dish a career-high 12 assists, along with 22 points, in a March 24th win versus Miami. However, Lewis would briefly leave this game due to dizziness, before later returning. The Celtics started the season slow, as after 10 games, they were sitting at 2-8, but a 7-game win streak to start January, and a 9-game win streak to end March, helped them finish 48-34, and keep Lewis's playoff streak alive. The Celtics entered the first round with a matchup against Charlotte, and Lewis was upping his play in the postseason as had become customary for him, and was really taking it to Charlotte. But then midway through the first quarter, he would collapse as he was running up the court. He would spring up quickly and come out of the game, but would return for about a minute in the second quarter, then about 6 minutes in the second half, before leaving the game due to shortness of breath, after putting up 17 points on 7 of 11 shooting in just 13 minutes of play in a Celtics Game 1 win. But this incident would end Lewis's season, and without their star player, the Celtics would drop the next 3 games, with 2 losses coming by just a single point. And although this was a disappointment for Boston, the bigger concern was Lewis's health, and how it would affect not only his career, but also his life. But Lewis's 6th season would end with him averaging about 21 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. Immediately after the game, Lewis underwent a series of tests from top doctors, who determined that Lewis had cardiomyopathy, which was the same ailment that had taken the life of Loyola Marymount star Hank Gathers just a couple years earlier. And maybe because this was hard news to accept, Lewis and his wife opted for a second opinion and switched hospitals, where a team at the Harvard Teaching Hospital diagnosed Lewis with a less serious condition that causes fainting and is rarely fatal, with one of the lead physicians even suggesting that Lewis could continue to play professionally with no limitations. Naturally, Lewis chose to side with the doctors who suggested he could continue his career, and would eventually resume exercise under medical supervision, and by late July, he was beginning to return to light workouts, and would start one of these workouts at about 4 p.m. on July 27, 1993. Lewis would reportedly shoot around for about an hour at the Brandeis Training Center, while simultaneously talking to onlookers, as he was never engaged in any serious physical exertion. But then, at around 5:15, Lewis would collapse in a seated position on the floor, where a friend of his would identify that he did not have a pulse, and would attempt to revive him until paramedics arrived and transported him to the hospital, where he would sadly pass away a couple hours later from a cardiac arrest at just 27 years old. The autopsy on Lewis would eventually reveal an enlarged and abnormal heart with extensive scarring. However, preliminary tests would also rule out substance abuse. So after just 6 seasons, as he was entering his prime, Reggie Lewis was gone, and the NBA lost one of their greatest talents, and the world lost an all-around great person, as Lewis was constantly helping out the community during his time in Boston. The Celtics would eventually honor Lewis by retiring his number on March 22, 1995. Reggie Lewis was supposed to be the successor to Larry Bird and the next great Boston Celtic, and he had given every indication that that was who he would be in his 6-year career. He joined a still elite Celtics team in a minimal role, but waited patiently in the wings during his rookie season. Then when he got his first opportunity in year 2, he showed poise and confidence, and quickly established himself as one of the top up-and-comers in the league. He continued his consistent play over the next few seasons, as he gradually took the reins from Larry Bird, until finally becoming the team's captain and leader in his final season. He was the last player you would think would have heart issues, as he was a workhorse on both ends of the floor. And even though he is more remembered for his offensive ability, he was a good two-way player, whose long wingspan gave him an added advantage on defense. He was no nonsense and was a model professional both on and off the court. But what made him a Boston Celtic more than anything was how he always elevated his game during the postseason, as he averaged at least 20 points in every postseason after his rookie year, and was even giving indications of an all-time great postseason in his final game versus Charlotte. He was gone far too soon, but he gave Boston fans a lot of hope for the post-Larry Bird era, and he would have most likely lived up to expectations if his heart would have let him. And even though his career was short, his impact was huge, and everyone should know that Reggie Lewis was the real deal. But that's it for today's episode on the late, great Reggie Lewis. Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you like this one, check out this one on his 1987 draft mate, or just check out this playlist for a bunch of videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.